My mother honestly believed she could completely delete my real father from my life, replace him with a creepy new boyfriend, and force me to call a total stranger Dad. But she underestimated one crucial metric. Data always finds a way, and I never broke contact with my actual father. My name is Kira, and I was only 13 years old when my entire world fractured into a million unfixable pieces. 5 months before everything changed, my dad was convicted of a brutal manslaughter charge that made absolutely zero statistical or logical sense to anyone who knew him. The prosecution claimed he had viciously attacked a customer in the bathroom of a local sports bar during his shift. But the truth is, I was actually there with him in the back office doing my homework. I saw him go into the restroom completely calm, holding fresh towels, and run out just minutes later, pale, panicked, and covered in dark blood, screaming for someone to dial 911. The local police arrived almost instantly, but instead of sealing the perimeter, they immediately slammed handcuffs on my dad's wrists and dragged him away without asking a single question. The next time I saw him, he was sitting behind thick plexiglass in a maximum security prison. My dad didn't have a single violent bone in his body. He was a soft-spoken logistics manager who spent his weekends building birdhouses and helping me with my science projects. But the local media quickly painted him as an unstable monster. What made me incredibly suspicious from the beginning, though, was my mother's bizarre behavior the exact second the judge's gavel dropped. On day 1 of his sentence, she completely cleared out every single photograph of my father, packed his clothes into trash bags, and brought home her new boyfriend, an arrogant city building inspector named Victor. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Your father is a convicted killer, Kira. Victor is your real family now, and you need to distance yourself from that monster for your own safety." I was confused, numb, and entirely overwhelmed at first, but when she announced their official engagement just 5 months later, I became 100% convinced of my dad's innocence. That is also when the domestic nightmare shifted into high gear. With my father safely locked away behind steel bars, Victor got way too comfortable in our house. He started acting like he owned every square inch of our property, and worse, he started acting like he owned me. He would sit directly across from me at the dinner table, eating his food agonizingly slowly, staring at me with these heavy, lingering, uncomfortable eyes, saying things like, "You're growing up so fast, Kira," becoming such a beautiful, pretty young lady. It made my skin crawl and my stomach turn, but my mother actually thought it was sweet and attentive. Even when I finally gathered the courage to tell her for the very first time that Victor made my skin crawl and that I felt unsafe, she just laughed it off, calling me a dramatic, ungrateful teenager. She must have run straight to him with that conversation, because that exact night, while my mother was fast asleep, Victor quietly slipped into my dark bedroom, grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave deep purple marks, and whispered right into my ear, "Bad little girls who snitch always get punished. Remember that." I was absolutely terrified, honey, but that was the exact moment the data aligned in my head. I realized my mother was a completely compromised asset, and I couldn't trust her with a single piece of information. So I started keeping my own dangerous secrets. I began writing letters to my dad, hiding the pages carefully between the sheets of my algebra textbooks, and mailing them from my best friend's house after school so they wouldn't hit our home mailbox. My dad would write back through a secret, encrypted prison email network to an account I created on a school library computer without my mother ever knowing. Welcome back to Aunt Karma Stories, honey, where we look past the clean family portraits and expose the monsters hiding in plain sight. If your jaw is already dropping at how fast this mother traded her loyal husband for a predator, smash that like button and subscribe, because the spreadsheet of receipts I'm about to uncover is going to blow your mind. Things went from bad to horrific on a specific Thursday afternoon. I came home from school to find out that my mother had legally changed my last name on all official academic records to Victor's surname without even telling me. "You'll thank me when you're older. It makes us a real family," she said, humming happily while flipping through a bridal magazine. That night, Victor entered my bedroom without knocking to celebrate our new family status. He sat on the edge of my bed, placed his heavy hand firmly on my thigh, and told me I should be grateful to have a dad who cares so much. I shoved him off with everything I had, locked myself inside the bathroom, and cried on the cold tile floor until his heavy footsteps finally retreated down the hallway. I wrote to my dad about that exact incident the next morning. When his reply came back through the school computer, it wasn't a digital printout. It was a scanned image of a handwritten letter, and parts of the ink were completely smeared and see-through, almost as if his tears had hit the paper while he was writing from his cell. That image almost broke my spirit, honey, but it also lit a fire under me. The audit was officially open, and I was going to find out exactly who put my father in that cage, no matter the cost. The only thing that kept me moving forward through that digital fog was the upcoming calendar date of my father's birthday. I knew my mother hated any mention of his name, but I naively thought that even a heartless woman would show a shred of basic human decency for a man she spent 12 years of her life with. I remember standing in the kitchen on a Tuesday evening, watching her polish her engagement ring, and asking as calmly as possible if Uncle Henry could drive me to the facility for just a 30-minute birthday visit. I told her I didn't expect her to come, that I just wanted to hold his hand through the glass and tell him he wasn't forgotten. My mother didn't even look up from her ring. She just let out a cold, sharp laugh that sounded like ice cracking in a glass. "Absolutely not," she snapped, her voice dripping with artificial disgust. "We are not wasting our gas or our weekend on a convicted criminal. Besides, Victor already bought VIP tickets for the regional automotive exhibition 3 towns over for that exact weekend. We are going as a family. Kira and Victor specifically booked a luxury suite with adjoining rooms so we can all bond properly. You are going to put on a nice dress, smile, and act like a normal daughter for once." The mention of adjoining rooms made my stomach instantly drop into a bottomless pit of pure dread, honey. When I stood my ground, raised my voice, and screamed that my father was innocent and that I would never accept Victor, the monster himself walked into the kitchen. Without saying a single word, Victor swung his heavy hand and backhanded me across the face so hard that my vision blurred and I hit the kitchen counter. My mother just stood there, crossed her arms, and watched the entire thing without a single blink, completely validating his violence with her silence. I was forced into that car that Friday afternoon like a prisoner being transported to an execution block. The entire weekend at the hotel resort was a psychological thriller. Victor made sure to stay uncomfortably close to me during the exhibition, his heavy arm constantly draped over my shoulder like a predator marking its territory in public. But the real horror happened on Saturday night. My mother had too many signature cocktails at the hotel lounge and completely passed out in the main bedroom. I had locked the adjoining door on my side, but Victor had the master keycard. Around 2:00 a.m., the soft electronic beep of the lock echoed through my dark room. He was heavily intoxicated, his eyes bloodshot, and this time he didn't just stop at a terrifying comment. He walked straight to my bed, pinned my arms down, and his hands went completely across the line, violating every boundary of safety I had left. I lay there frozen, tears streaming into my ears, feeling completely subhuman, humiliated, and broken. The drive back home on Sunday was a mute nightmare, but the universe wasn't done breaking me yet. The very week we returned, my mother decided to do a deep clean of my bedroom while I was at school. She found the secret aluminum tin where I had been keeping the printouts of my dad's prison emails. When I walked into the backyard that afternoon, I saw her standing over the brick fire pit, watching the ashes of my father's words float up into the gray sky. "This is for your own good," she said coldly, tossing the last page into the flames. "And since you clearly can't be trusted to cut ties with that murderer, Victor suggested a new house rule." I walked into the house and my jaw dropped. Victor was standing in my hallway with a cordless drill, and my bedroom door was completely off its hinges, lying flat on the living room floor. From that night on, I had zero privacy. Victor would stand in the empty doorway for hours in the pitch black, the tip of his cigarette glowing like an evil eye, just watching me try to sleep. Welcome back to Aunt Karma stories, honey, where the shadows in the house grow longer before the light of justice finally burns them down. If your heart is breaking for Kira right now, make sure to drop a comment below, because this is the exact moment where the victim decided to become the investigator. The next morning, I couldn't take the suffocating weight anymore. During lunch break, I snuck past the school monitors into the dark tech lab, logged into my secret cloud drive, and typed out a massive, frantic, hour-long email to my dad's old criminal defense lawyer. I didn't even care if it sounded crazy. I just spilled every single data point about Victor's abuse, the bar incident, and my mother's suspicious timeline. I expected nothing but an automated out-of-office reply, but 2 weeks later, an encrypted file landed in my inbox. The lawyer told me he couldn't legally intervene without concrete evidence of a frame job, but at the very end of his lengthy message, there was a weird postscript. "Did you check the hidden log your father mentioned in his third letter?" My heart stopped. I immediately pulled up my digital archives, searching every single sentence my dad had ever sent me before my mother burned the originals. And there it was, buried in an old message from 3 months ago. "Kira, if you ever feel like the house is closing in on you, go up to the old attic storage, behind the rusted copper radiator in the far corner. I hid something there the night before my arrest just in case things went sideways." I memorized the coordinates, deleted the browser history, and waited for the perfect operational window. That window opened the following Wednesday when my mother and Victor went out for a celebratory anniversary dinner downtown. The moment their car cleared the driveway, my hands shook violently as I pulled down the creaky attic ladder, clicked on my tactical flashlight, and climbed up into the dusty, suffocating heat of the roof space. I crawled over the loose insulation boards, reached behind the heavy metal radiator, and my fingers brushed against something thick wrapped tightly in industrial plastic wrap. I pulled it out, sliced the plastic with my fingernail, and opened a thick, leather-bound personal journal. I flipped straight to the final marked page, and there, in my dad's neat, familiar engineering handwriting, the text read, "It's been 3 weeks since I caught Lauren and Victor sneaking out of the basement office at the bar during my off hours. They don't know I saw them. I don't know how to confront her, but Victor has been threatening to ruin our family logistics business if I speak up. I think he's planning something dangerous." I sat there in the dark, my blood running completely sub-zero as the entire puzzle finally clicked into place. My dad didn't just stumble into a bar fight, honey. He was systematically eliminated by his wife and her lover. And just as that massive realization hit my brain, the loud, unmistakable sound of Victor's SUV tires crunching on the gravel driveway below made my heart violently hammer against my ribs. They were back an hour early. My heart pounded so hard against my ribs I was certain Victor could hear it from the garage below. I could hear the heavy car doors slamming outside, followed by the unmistakable, rhythmic clicking of my mother's designer heels on the concrete walkway. My hands were shaking so violently that the beam of my tactical flashlight danced wildly across the dusty, cobwebbed attic floorboards, making the shadows look like tiny ghosts closing in on me. I had only seconds to decide what to do with the heavy, leather-bound journal. I shoved the cold leather diary straight under my oversized school shirt, pressing it tight against my stomach, and scrambled back toward the rectangular attic opening, but my operational window had already slammed shut. Just as I reached the top of the wooden ladder, Victor's massive, shaved head appeared through the ceiling hole. His dark, cold eyes immediately locked onto mine in the dim light, and for a long, agonizing moment, he didn't say a word. He just stared at me with an unreadable, sinister expression that made my blood run completely sub-zero. He slowly climbed up the remaining steps, his broad, heavy shoulders barely fitting through the narrow opening, and stood completely upright in my sanctuary. I backed up until my spine hit the rough, unfinished wood of the roof support beams, my hands defensively folded over the secret journal hidden under my clothes. Victor looked around the attic slowly, deliberately taking in the disturbed dust hanging in the air, and the shifted cardboard boxes near the rusted copper radiator, where my dad had hidden his life insurance policy. "What exactly are you doing up here, Kira?" he asked, his voice chillingly calm, but with a sharp, dangerous edge that made my skin crawl. I forced my vocal cords to stabilize, looking him dead in the eye, and told him I was just searching for my old childhood stuffed animals because I couldn't sleep in a room without a door. He didn't believe a single word, honey. I could see it in the way his jaw heavily tightened and how his large hands flexed into fists at his sides. He took a heavy step closer, and the suffocating smell of cheap red wine from their dinner, mixed with his heavy, expensive cologne, instantly made me feel physically sick. He leaned down, whispered that I was an absolutely terrible liar just like my pathetic father, and then he lunged forward, grabbing my upper arm with a grip so brutal his fingers dug straight into my muscle to leave deep bruises. He yanked me violently toward the ladder, forcing me to use my free arm to clamp down on my shirt so the leather journal wouldn't slip out onto the floor. My mother was waiting at the bottom of the ladder, her arms tightly crossed and her foot tapping impatiently on the hardwood floor. She looked completely annoyed, asking why I was always sneaking around like some kind of common thief in my own home, completely oblivious to the fact that she was sleeping next to a predator. Victor smoothly lied to her face, his entire demonic demeanor changing into a warm, protective father figure in an instant, telling her that I was probably just hiding contraband or acting out because of the upcoming wedding. I panicked, playing into his narrative, and started crying on cue, begging my mother to let me have my privacy back. She just rolled her eyes, completely exhausted by the domestic drama, and told us both to go to bed. That night, I waited until 3:00 a.m., listening to Victor's deep, rhythmic snoring mixing with my mother's breathing down the hall. The house settled into its nighttime creaks as I carefully pulled the journal out from under my mattress and slipped it inside my pillowcase, feeling the hard corners dig into my cheek as I lay awake, staring at the empty doorway where Victor's shadow usually appeared like clockwork. On Monday morning, I knew I had to secure the data before the house completely consumed me. During lunch break, while my classmates were in the cafeteria, I snuck into the back row of the empty school computer lab. The room was silent except for the low hum of old hard drives. With my hands still trembling, I used my phone to take crystal-clear, high-resolution photos of every single page of my dad's journal, angling the screen to avoid the glare of the fluorescent lights. The entries went back 3 whole years, detailing how Victor had systematically used his position as a city inspector to blackbox my dad's logistics company with fake safety violations, until my dad caught him embezzling cash from the bar accounts. I uploaded every single image file to a brand new, secure cloud storage drive under a completely fake username, double-checking the progress bar until it hit 100%. Then, with a cold breath, I deleted the original photos from my phone's trash folder, knowing Victor had started tracking my device. Welcome back to Aunt Karma Stories, honey, where the victims don't just cry, they build airtight cases. If you are rooting for Kira to absolutely destroy this toxic setup, hit that like button right now, because when I got home from school that afternoon, the trap was already waiting for me. I walked into my bedroom and my heart completely stopped. Victor was sitting right on my unmade bed, surrounded by utter destruction. He had completely dumped out every single drawer, scattered my clothes across the floor like dead leaves, flipped my mattress, and even emptied my old childhood jewelry box, leaving everything I owned broken. He slowly turned his head toward me, holding his heavy hands open, and asked in a dangerously quiet voice, "Where is the book, Kira? I know what you found up there." I played entirely dumb, forcing a look of pure confusion onto my face despite the terror screaming in my chest, and told him I had no idea what he was talking about. He stood up, grabbed my shoulders, and shook me so hard my teeth clicked together, but right at that exact second, the front door opened and my mother walked in, her keys jingling. Victor's entire face transformed in a millisecond. He released me, smiled warmly, and told her he was just helping me organize my messy room. My mother believed him without a single question, and right there at the dinner table, Victor announced that they were moving the wedding up to next month. I felt physically sick looking at the gray food on my plate, knowing the walls were closing in, but I had one final card to play. It was time to contact my dad's ultimate ally, Uncle Henry. I spent the entire night staring at the blinking red light of the new surveillance camera Victor had installed in the hallway directly outside my doorless room. The digital eye was tracking my every breath, honey, but it didn't know that my mind was already executing a counter-strategy. The very next morning at school, during my physical education class, I faked severe stomach cramps to get a pass to the outdoor track bleachers. Once I was completely clear of the security cameras, I ran straight to the rusty public payphone near the stadium fence. My fingers were trembling so hard I dropped my coins twice, but I finally dialed the unlisted number of Uncle Henry, my dad's closest childhood friend. Henry was a mountain of a man who worked commercial construction, smelled constantly of fresh sawdust, and always kept butterscotch candies in his flannel shirt pockets for me. When his gruff voice answered on the third ring, I completely broke, the words tumbling over each other as I explained the frame job, the hidden journal, and Victor's sudden wedding timeline. Henry didn't panic for a single second. His voice became instantly steady, cutting through my fear like a laser beam. "Listen to me very carefully, Kira," he whispered, his tone dropping an octave. "Meet me at the public library basement archive tomorrow exactly at 4:00 p.m. I'll tell your mother I saw you walking home and offered a ride if she checks your tracking data. Act completely normal at home. Do not let the monster see your cards." The next afternoon, I practically sprinted to the library, my backpack bouncing hard against my spine. Uncle Henry was waiting in the far corner of the dark parking lot inside his faded red pickup truck. The moment I climbed into the passenger seat, I pulled out my phone and loaded the secure cloud drive, swiping through the high-resolution photos of my dad's engineering logbook. Henry's face grew darker with every single swipe, his massive knuckles turning completely white as he gripped the steering wheel. "I knew it," he muttered, his jaw tightening until the muscles stood out. The entire investigation was wrapped up too fast. The local precinct didn't even check the back exit security logs or interview the kitchen staff. They just wanted an easy conviction. But we need more than your dad's suspicions to bust this wide open, Kira. We need hard data, forensic timestamps, and physical eyes. I'm going to start digging into the staff who worked the bar that exact night. Welcome back to Aunt Karma Stories, honey, where the true family allies don't wear capes. They wear work boots and collect receipts. If you are ready to see Uncle Henry completely dismantle this corruption, drop a comment below, because the investigation was about to go completely rogue. Over the next 2 weeks, I ran a high-risk operational schedule, meeting Uncle Henry at the library basement 3 separate times while Victor waited in the school parking lot, completely oblivious. Henry's construction buddies started pulling strings across the city, tracking down the exact staff members from that fateful night. First, he found Edward, the massive bouncer who was managing the bar's front door. Edward confessed to Henry that he had explicitly seen Victor enter the restroom exactly 30 seconds before my dad did, which completely contradicted Victor's official police statement, claiming he was at home watching television all evening. Edward admitted he had been too terrified to speak up during the initial trial, because Victor was a powerful city inspector who could shut down the bar with a single signature. Next, Henry tracked down Caroline, the redhead bartender who dialed 911. She confirmed that Victor had been hovering around the bar area for weeks prior to the incident, constantly asking weird questions about my dad's shift schedules and closing routines. But the ultimate breakthrough landed on the third meeting. Uncle Henry brought Brian, the veteran general manager of the sports bar, directly to our secret library archive. Brian revealed a massive piece of hidden data. The police had only confiscated the main footage from the cash registers, completely ignoring a backup server that recorded the narrow hallway leading directly to the restrooms. Brian had preserved that old hard drive in a locked filing cabinet in his home basement, completely forgotten until Henry started asking questions. We gathered inside Brian's living room, the air thick with the smell of black coffee, as he connected the dusty drive to his laptop. My heart completely stopped as the video file loaded. The digital timestamp on the screen was crystal clear. Victor entered the bathroom corridor at exactly 9:47 p.m., walking with total casualness. My dad didn't enter the frame until 9:52 p.m., holding his stack of towels. Victor finally exited the corridor at 9:51 p.m., calmly adjusting his cuffs and checking his wristwatch, right before my dad ran out covered in blood, screaming for a medic. It was an absolute black-and-white frame job, honey. Victor had a full 4 minutes of complete privacy inside that room to execute his target and plant the weapon before my dad ever walked through the door. Henry immediately copied the raw video data onto 4 separate, encrypted USB drives. "We have to be incredibly careful now, Kira," Henry warned, locking the drives in his steel toolbox. "Victor has connections inside the local municipal departments. We can't just walk into the precinct without an airtight wrapper. I'm taking this straight to a federal defense attorney tomorrow morning. You just need to survive inside that house for 48 more hours." But the universe didn't give us 48 hours, honey. because when I slipped back through our front door that evening, Victor was standing right at the top of the stairs, holding my missing school backpack in his massive hand. Victor slowly descended the wooden stairs, his heavy work boots making each step groan under his weight, his eyes completely locked onto mine like a hawk pinning down its prey. He dumped the contents of my school backpack right onto the living room rug, kicking my textbooks aside until he found my spare smartphone, the old device I had been using to access the secure cloud network. "You really thought you were clever, didn't you, Kira?" He whispered, his voice dangerously low, his breathing heavy with rage. He grabbed me by the hair and dragged me straight into the kitchen, throwing me against the drywall so hard that a framed family portrait shattered on the floorboards. My mother wasn't home yet. Her shift at the hospital didn't end for another 2 hours, leaving me completely alone with the monster. Victor slammed the phone onto the kitchen counter and forced my thumb against the biometric scanner, unlocking the interface before I could pull away. I watched in absolute horror as his thick fingers opened the encrypted cloud application, systematically guessing my security pattern on the third attempt because he had been tracking my keystrokes through the home network. "You think some old photos of a dead man's diary are going to stop this wedding?" He sneered, a twisted, victorious grin spreading across his face as his finger aggressively tapped the screen, permanently deleting every single high-resolution image of my dad's journal from the server. He didn't just wipe the drive, honey. He wiped the trash bin, the backup caches, and the temporary folders, ensuring that no consumer-grade data recovery software could ever bring those pages back. He tossed the fried phone into a sink full of running water, watching the screen flicker and die. "Your little construction worker friend Henry can't save you now, Kira. Without the original leather book to verify the handwriting in court, those digital photos are completely useless. Any cheap lawyer will argue they were manipulated by a bitter teenager. Welcome back to Aunt Karma stories, honey, where the villain thinks he's playing chess, but he completely forgot that the board is digital and the bytes are already distributed. If your blood is absolutely boiling at how tech-savvy this predator is, smash that share button, because Victor was about to make the biggest tactical error of his entire criminal career." He leaned over the counter, his suffocating wine breath hitting my face, and completely laid out his entire operation, completely intoxicated by his own perceived invincibility. He boasted about how he had planned the entire bar frame job for 6 months, using a duplicate kitchen knife he had stolen from our own house during a backyard barbecue to ensure my dad's DNA would be embedded in the forensic evidence. He admitted that the victim in the restroom was just random collateral damage, a drunk customer who caught Victor planting the weapon and started asking questions, forcing Victor to silence him quickly and messy. "Your mother was the easiest asset to flip," Victor laughed, an ugly, hollow sound that echoed through the empty kitchen. "She was so desperate for corporate status and so buried in credit card debt after your father's logistics company started failing that she practically begged me to take over the estate. Once the wedding is official next month, her hospital life insurance policy gets transferred to my commercial account, and if she has a sudden, tragic accident on the highway, well, the payout doubles." He was so busy gloating, so entirely blinded by his own arrogance, that he didn't notice the tiny blue indicator light blinking inside the front pocket of my school hoodie. I had kept my best friend Ashley's old voice recorder active since the moment I stepped through the front gate, and every single second of his graphic confession was being captured in high-fidelity audio. But just as Victor reached out to grab my shoulder to threaten me one last time, the heavy front door clicked open, and my mother walked straight into the kitchen, holding a bag of groceries. She had returned early because she forgot her corporate tablet, and she had caught the final, undeniable 60 seconds of Victor's monologue about her debt, her insurance, and the murder weapon. The brown paper bag slipped from her hands, oranges and plastic containers rolling across the broken glass on the floor as her face turned completely white. The digital veil had finally been shredded, honey, and the monster was caught in his own trap. My mother stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, her gaze darting from the spilled groceries to the shattered glass, and finally to Victor's hand, which was still hovering near my shoulder. For the first time in 3 years, the engineered delusion she had built around this man completely collapsed under the weight of his own words. Victor's face shifted instantly, the arrogant sneer melting away into a practiced, desperate mask of concern as he took a step toward her, his hands raised in a defensive posture. "Lauren, sweetheart, listen to me," he stammered, his voice losing its terrifying composure. "Kira is having another one of her episodes. She's completely unstable. She was screaming at me, and I was just trying to calm her down before she hurt herself." But the data loop had already played out in her mind, honey. She had heard him explicitly lay out the financial metrics of her own life insurance policy and the mechanics of the bar frame job. She backed away toward the front hallway, her hands trembling violently as she reached into her coat pocket for her phone, but Victor realized his operational window was closing fast. He lunged forward, his heavy boots crushing the rolling oranges on the floor, and slammed his hand over her wrist, twisting it until her phone clattered against the baseboard. I didn't waste a single millisecond. While Victor was occupied trying to physically restrain my mother in the hallway, I reached into the front pocket of my school hoodie, verified that the tiny blue indicator light on the voice recorder was still active, and bolted out the back patio door into the pouring rain. I sprinted across the wet grass, climbed the chain-link fence without looking back, and ran straight down the dark suburban avenue until my lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass. I didn't stop until I reached the bright, fluorescent safety of the 24-hour gas station 3 blocks away. My hands shook so badly I could barely press the buttons on the public payphone, but within 4 minutes, Uncle Henry's red pickup truck pulled into the parking lot, its tires splashing through the deep puddles. The moment I climbed into the cab, I pulled the voice recorder from my pocket and handed it to him. Henry plugged the device directly into his truck's dashboard audio system. The cabin was filled with the crystal-clear, high-fidelity audio of Victor bragging about the stolen kitchen knife, the duplicate weapon, the insurance fraud, and the exact timeline of the frame job. Henry didn't say a single word. He just looked at me with deep, fierce pride, started the engine, and dialed a direct line to a federal investigator he had briefed the previous morning. "We don't go to the local precinct, Kira," Henry said, his face illuminated by the green glow of the dashboard. "Victor's municipal connections are deep, but federal audio forensics will bypass his entire network. It's time to close the audit. Welcome back to Aunt Karma stories, honey, where the digital footprints never lie and the receipts always catch up to the predator. If your heart is racing to see how this final sting plays out, hit that subscribe button right now, because the next morning, the entire system turned against Victor." At exactly 8:00 a.m., while Victor was preparing his morning coffee in our kitchen, 3 unmarked black SUVs pulled into the driveway, completely blocking his escape route. Federal agents, backed by a specialized state forensics team, executed a high-priority search warrant based on the audio confession and the backup bar video data Henry had secured. They didn't just search the house, honey. They brought a metal detector into the backyard and began scanning the ground near the old brick fire pit where my mother had burned my father's letters. Within 2 hours, forensic technicians unearthed a buried plastic toolbox containing the original, blood-stained clothes Victor had worn on the night of the manslaughter, evidence he had kept as a twisted trophy of his own brilliance. As the agents led Victor down the front steps in heavy steel handcuffs, his face was completely pale, stripped of all his manufactured power. My mother sat on the porch steps, her face buried in her hands, completely broken by the reality of what she had allowed into our lives. But the justice system wasn't done updating the records yet. The federal defense attorney immediately filed an emergency motion to overturn my father's conviction based on the newly discovered forensic timestamps and the audio files. The system was finally correcting its errors, and the countdown to my dad's release had officially begun. The heavy steel gates of the maximum security facility groaned loudly as they slowly rolled open, cutting through the crisp morning air. I stood on the damp asphalt next to Uncle Henry's red pickup truck, my hands shoved deep into my hoodie pockets, watching the small security door at the checkpoint finally click open. For 3 long years, my dad had been nothing but compressed data on a school library computer monitor, a series of scanned images and smeared ink. But as he stepped out into the blinding sunlight, wearing a simple gray sweatshirt and holding a single cardboard box of his belongings, the metrics became completely real. He looked noticeably thinner, and the hair around his temples had turned entirely silver. But the moment his tired eyes locked onto mine, his face cracked into the warmest, most familiar smile I had ever seen. He dropped the box onto the gravel, not caring about the old paper files spilling out, and wrapped his arms around me so tight I could hear the steady, rhythmic thump of his heart against my ribs. "You did it, Kira," he whispered into my hair, his voice thick with emotion as he held me close. "You actually pulled me out of the dark. Welcome back to Aunt Karma Stories, honey, where the files are officially locked, the accounts are settled, and the bad actors are finally stripped of their assets. If you are crying happy tears for this beautiful reunion, make sure to smash that like button and drop a final comment below, because the closing spreadsheet of this audit is pure poetic justice." While my dad was taking his first breath of free air, the legal system was completely dismantling Victor's entire life. The federal prosecutor used the audio confession from my hoodie recorder and the unburied backyard evidence to secure an absolute slam-dunk indictment. Victor was hit with first-degree murder, evidence tampering, perjury, and corporate insurance fraud. Because he had boasted so graphically about his methods on tape, his defense team couldn't find a single loophole to exploit. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the absolute possibility of parole, matching him with the exact same cell block configuration he had forced upon my father. As for my mother, the fallout was catastrophic but entirely necessary. While she wasn't criminally charged as an active co-conspirator, her signature was on every single fraudulent financial document Victor had drawn up. The bank systematically liquidated her commercial accounts to pay off the massive debts, and she was forced to sell the suburban house to cover the legal fees. She tried to call me from a burner phone 2 weeks after the trial, crying and begging for a second chance, but I didn't even let the call connect. I simply selected her contact profile, hit the block button, and deleted her number from my system permanently. Some data assets are simply too corrupted to ever be recovered, honey. Uncle Henry helped us pack up my dad's original engineering tools and birdhouse supplies from the old garage, loading them into the back of the pickup truck. We didn't look back at the empty house or the empty doorway where the shadow used to stand. My dad and I moved 2 states away to a quiet, sunlit town near the coast, where the air smelled like salt instead of cheap red wine and expensive cologne. We rented a small house with a massive backyard, and the very first thing my dad did was install a solid wood front door with 3 heavy, secure brass locks, not to keep me in, but to ensure that our sanctuary would never be breached again. I sat at our new kitchen table that evening, opening my laptop to finally deactivate the secret cloud drive that had saved our lives. The progress bar reached 100% as the deletion process finished, leaving the server completely clean. The case was closed, the receipts were fully paid, and for the first time in my life, the data was finally at peace. We genuinely believed that moving 2 states away and deleting the secret cloud drives would be enough to permanently format our lives. But corruption has a terrifyingly long memory. It was a chilly Tuesday evening in October, exactly 4 months after my dad's official release. The coastal air was thick with fog, and the only sound in our new home was the gentle ticking of the living room clock and my dad's quiet breathing as he sketched a new birdhouse design at the kitchen counter. Suddenly, my laptop screen, which was sitting open on the dining table, flickered violently. A black terminal window popped up, bypassing my firewall protocols, and a single line of text printed itself across the interface in bright red characters. "You deleted the files, Kira, but you forgot that some backups are stored in human minds. The audit isn't closed until I say it is." My blood instantly turned to solid ice, honey. I ran the IP tracker loop, and the digital signal bounced back from a high-security node located right inside the regional penitentiary, where Victor was serving his life sentence. Even behind maximum security steel bars, the monster had managed to secure a smuggled mobile device through a corrupted prison guard, and he was already using his remaining hidden financial resources to hunt us down. Before I could even alert my dad, the home network completely went black, the Wi-Fi router dying instantly as a massive, coordinated cyber attack flooded our local bandwidth. I knew this wasn't just a digital threat, it was a physical tracking vector. Welcome back to Aunt Karma Stories, honey, where the cell doors might lock, but the digital venom can still leak through the cracks. If your jaw is dropping that this criminal is still breathing down Kira's neck from a prison cell, smash that like button, because the spreadsheet of danger was about to expand into a whole new territory. I grabbed my dad's hand, forced him to leave his sketches behind, and we immediately bolted to the garage, locking the heavy brass deadbolts behind us. I dialed Uncle Henry from a burner phone, my voice cracking in the dark space. Henry didn't even hesitate. He told us to drive straight to an abandoned lumber yard on the edge of the state line, an old industrial property his construction firm had bought for salvage. When we arrived, the red pickup truck was already parked in the shadows of the massive, rusted tin warehouse. Henry stepped out, holding a rugged tactical tablet connected to a private satellite link. "Victor isn't working alone anymore, Kira," Henry said, his face looking incredibly grim under the green screen illumination. "My contacts in the municipal audit department just confirmed that Victor's old boss at the city hall, a senior councilman named Director Reynolds, has been systematically burning financial ledgers for the past 48 hours. Victor didn't just embezzle cash from the sports bar. He was laundering millions in illegal construction kickbacks for high-ranking city officials. Now that Victor is down, Reynolds is terrified that your dad's old logistics files contain the tracking numbers for those transactions, and he's hired local recovery assets to wipe you two out permanently." The data was expanding, honey. This wasn't just a domestic nightmare anymore. It was a full-scale corporate conspiracy that went straight to the top of the local government. Henry's tablet suddenly beeped, showing a live traffic camera feed from the highway leading directly to our new coastal neighborhood. Two dark, unmarked pickup trucks with tinted windows were moving at high speed, completely synchronized, heading straight toward our empty house. If we had stayed in our beds for just 20 more minutes, we would have been caught in a complete blackout trap. My dad stood next to the truck, his knuckles white, looking at the digital map. "They think I have the physical ledger sheets," my dad said, his voice dropping into a deep, protective tone I hadn't heard since before his arrest. "But I don't need the paper. I remember the exact routing numbers from the bar's offshore accounts because I flagged them in the logistics ledger 3 years ago. I can map the entire network from memory." I looked at Uncle Henry, and a slow, cold smile spread across my face despite the terror. The predator thought he was closing the net on us, but he had just handed us the keys to his entire corrupt network. It was time to initiate a final, massive counter-raid, and this time, we weren't just going after Victor. We were going to take down the entire corrupt machine that put my father in that cage. The cold rain started drumming violently against the rusted tin roof of the abandoned lumber warehouse as my dad sat down on an upturned wooden crate, staring at Uncle Henry's tactical tablet. His eyes, once clouded by the misery of a maximum security prison cell, were now sharp, focused, and entirely synchronized with the data. For the next 3 hours, while the storm raged outside, he systematically downloaded the encrypted memory of his past 3 years from his brain, reciting every single suspicious routing number, corporate shell company, and hidden transaction timestamp he had flagged before his arrest. I sat directly next to him, my fingers flying across the auxiliary keyboard, organizing the raw numbers into a master spreadsheet that would completely dismantle Director Reynolds' entire criminal infrastructure. We weren't just looking at minor embezzlement anymore, honey. The data revealed a massive, decade-long money laundering pipeline that routed illegal construction kickbacks straight through international tax havens before dumping the clean cash back into Victor's commercial real estate accounts. Welcome back to Aunt Karma Stories, honey, where the paper trails are long, but our digital tracking loops are faster. If your heart is pounding to see this teenage investigator outsmart a whole boardroom of corrupt city officials, hit that share button right now, because we were about to upload a financial bomb. Just as the final encrypted folder reached 95% capacity on our private server, the tablet's proximity sensor let out a low, rhythmic warning chime. Uncle Henry immediately killed the screen brightness, throwing the warehouse into near-total darkness, except for the pale gray light filtering through the cracked high windows. Outside, the low, throbbing rumble of a heavy V8 engine crawled to a stop right near the collapsed wooden gate of the lumber yard. A pair of bright, Piercing halogen headlights cut through the thick fog, slowly sweeping across the wet concrete floor of the main courtyard. Reynolds' recovery team had managed to trace our burner phone's satellite ping back to these exact coordinates. My dad grabbed my shoulder, pulling me quietly behind a massive stack of salvaged oak timbers, while Uncle Henry reached into his heavy steel toolbox, pulling out a solid iron crowbar with a grim expression. We could hear the heavy truck doors clicking open, followed by the squelch of heavy tactical boots stepping through the deep puddles outside. "Check the perimeter," a gruff voice barked through the rain. "The signal died right here. If the girl or the father has that drive, terminate the asset immediately. Reynolds wants this file permanently uninstalled." I lay there frozen in the dark, my heart hammering like a trapped bird, but my brain was still calculating the metrics. The data upload was stuck at 99% because the warehouse's metal roof was heavily degrading our cellular signal. I knew that if I didn't raise the tablet's auxiliary antenna toward the high window, the transfer would time out, and the entire spreadsheet of receipts would be lost forever. Leaving my father's protective grip, I dropped to my hands and knees, sliding along the damp concrete floor with millimeter precision, keeping my body completely hidden in the deep shadows of the timber stacks. The heavy footsteps were getting closer, the bright beams of their tactical flashlights cutting through the dust right above my head. I reached the base of the rusted iron ladder leading to the high ventilation window, gripped the cold metal rungs, and climbed up into the darkness. With my breath caught in my throat, I raised the tablet toward the glass. The small blue status indicator blinked twice, and then turned solid green. Transfer complete. Server locked. At that exact second, my hand accidentally brushed against a loose piece of sheet metal, sending it clattering down onto the floorboards below with a deafening bang. The flashlights instantly snapped toward my exact position, the blinding white light trapping me like a deer in the crosshairs. "Over there, up on the ladder," the gruff voice roared, and the blinding beams of two high-powered tactical flashlights pinned me against the cold iron rungs. My heart violently slammed against my ribs, honey, but I didn't drop the tablet. I gripped the wet metal tightly, looking down into the glare as the two heavily built recovery assets lunged toward the base of the ladder. But they completely underestimated one critical factor. You never enter a structural salvage yard without checking who owns the heavy machinery. Before their boots could even reach the first rung, the entire warehouse exploded with a deafening, mechanical roar. Uncle Henry had slipped into the driver's seat of the yard's old, 20-ton diesel forklift. With the headlights off and the massive iron forks lowered, he rammed the machine straight into a 20-foot stack of industrial steel shelving right behind the intruders. The heavy metal racks collapsed with a cataclysmic shriek of tearing iron, dumping tons of rusted pipes, gears, and concrete blocks directly into the path of the hitmen. The sheer kinetic impact sent them flying backward into the wet gravel, their flashlights shattering against the concrete and plunging the floor back into chaotic darkness. "Kira, jump!" my dad screamed through the cloud of rising dust. I didn't hesitate for a single millisecond. I dropped from the bottom rungs right into my father's waiting arms. He caught me cleanly, shielding my head with his body as Uncle Henry threw the forklift into reverse, its massive tires screeching on the wet floorboards, completely blocking the main exit corridor with a solid wall of industrial wreckage. We sprinted out through the narrow side fire exit, the freezing rain hitting our faces as we scrambled into the cabin of Henry's red pickup truck. Henry slammed his heavy boot onto the accelerator, and the truck roared out of the lumber yard, its four-wheel drive tearing through the mud and leaving the trapped recovery team buried under a mountain of scrap metal. Welcome back to the grand finale of Aunt Karma Stories, honey, where the corruption finally hits a concrete wall and the digital receipts are paid in full. If your heart is absolutely pounding with joy right now, smash that subscribe button and leave a victory comment, because the final audit of this entire criminal syndicate was about to be broadcast to the entire world. We didn't drive to a safe house, honey. We drove straight to the Regional Federal Bureau building downtown. The moment we walked into the brightly lit lobby, dripping wet and covered in warehouse dust, I slammed the tactical tablet onto the high reception counter. The federal defense attorney was already waiting there with a team of forensic auditors and a state prosecutor. Because my dad's memory had been 100% accurate, the master spreadsheet we uploaded from the attic and the lumber yard matched perfectly with the hidden offshore routing numbers. The dominoes fell with absolute, breathtaking speed. Within less than 12 hours, federal marshals executed a simultaneous, multi-jurisdictional raid across the entire city hall. Director Reynolds was arrested right inside his executive office while attempting to shred his duplicate accounting files. The state authorities seized over $12 million in illegal kickbacks, freezing every single commercial real estate account associated with Victor's name. Even better, the corrupt prison guard who had smuggled the phone to Victor was caught in a routine security audit that exact afternoon, completely cutting off the monster's connection to the outside world. Victor was immediately transferred to a maximum security disciplinary segregation unit, a dark, concrete isolation cell with 0 windows, 0 data access, and 0 human contact for the rest of his natural life. 2 weeks later, the state officially reinstated my dad's legal name, completely erasing Victor's surname from my academic and medical profiles forever. The court system issued a formal, public apology to my father, awarding our family a massive, multi-million-dollar corporate settlement funded entirely by the liquidation of Victor's seized real estate properties. My dad and I used the funds to permanently secure our freedom. We bought a beautiful, sunlit engineering workshop overlooking the rugged northern coastline, far away from the toxic shadows of our old suburban life. As I sat on the porch on a warm summer evening, watching my dad happily construct a massive, multi-tiered birdhouse with Uncle Henry, my phone lit up with a final notification from our legal team. Case 2026F. Assets fully recovered. System status. Absolute victory. My mother tried to send a final, desperate email from a shelter computer, begging to be included in our new financial life, but the algorithm automatically routed her message straight into the digital trash bin. The audit was permanently locked, the predators were thoroughly dismantled, and our family data was finally, beautifully clean.